Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Ceres podcast. In this episode, we talk to Paul Williams, the director of KFE UK Limited. I did have another introduction planned actually for this podcast, but I thought we'd give you a little bit of context, and this episode was recorded a good 4 weeks ago. So if we do sound a bit happy and having a bit of a laugh, it's because a lot of things have changed since recording. So just bear with us, and I hope you enjoy the episode. It's a really good one. But we learn a lot about Paul's history and ranges and just the way he thinks about the industry, which is really great. But I do want to acknowledge that there is a lot of, people going through hard times, including us and Karemco and yourselves and fish and chip shops and restaurants. So we didn't want to just fly into a podcast without touching on that. I will say that, it's been a sobering time for many people, and I hope that we can all get out the other end. And so, it's good to hear from you all. Keep all the messages coming, and hopefully those that are working are busy, and those that are not, hopefully they're not climbing up the walls. So enjoy. Paul, welcome to the Ceres podcast.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad we could finally do this. It's been about 2 years of me begging, not just for the podcast, but for everything.
Yes, true. I'm a difficult man, you know that.
Oh, yes, of course. But I'm used to difficult men, as you know my father.
Yes, very well, yes.
So
I'm not that difficult, to be fair.
He'd probably be laughing if he heard this.
I'm sure
if he could figure out how to use his phone to then do this.
He's about the same level as me, technology-wise.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he texts us by Siri now. He loves that.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. So he'll be like, "Hey Siri, text my wife," and then bickers. Siri knows all their arguments and everything. Yeah.
Oh. I assume he's still smoking as many, is he?
Yeah, it's weird because everyone rings me and says, "Oh, I heard your dad's health's not really good. What's he done to change it?" Oh, nothing.
No.
He's contributed to making it worse.
Yes. Yeah, I think he smokes more now than he did before.
Probably.
But,
he's got a point to prove.
Yeah.
We're not sure what it is yet. Me and George, my brother, often say that he's trying to defy the odds with the doctors, but I wonder who
You wouldn't want to be his doctor or specialist.
Oh, I've been to a meeting before with his doctors, and that was interesting.
An experience.
Yeah, I did leave sort of thinking, I can't believe I took a day off for this.
What was the point? Yeah.
Well, yeah, especially when, I'm sure you get it sometimes in any form of work that you will meet with somebody who is not willing to change anything and then wonders why the outcome's the same. This is a bit like my dad's...
Fairly regularly, yeah, actually.
This is like my dad's doctor's appointments.
Yes. I know your dad, yes. I've been in the office with him smoking and thinking...
Oh, the smoking room, as we call it.
Yeah. Do you mind if I smoke? Well, he's going to anyway, so it's pointless.
Yeah, well, to be fair, at least he asks. There was a time when he'd never ask, so,
Oh, no, I think I'm talking about the early days. And now he just doesn't ask. You just go in and see him through the smoke, the other side of the table.
Yeah, I remember your old business partner, Bill Shaw, when them two were together, you couldn't see anything in that room.
Oh, with him with his cigarettes and Bill with his cigars.
Yeah. You'd walk in there and you'd leave and I'd go home and my clothes stank.
People would probably think you were a smoker.
Oh, massively, massively. There was the time when I was a bit younger. It's a bit odd that we're starting the podcast talking about this, but when I was a bit younger, I went to a party and I got in the car and my dad was chugging a cigarette and my mum was with him. So my mum started shouting at me, saying that she could smell cigarettes, and it was me. I must have been smoking. And I was like, "Are you blind?" This guy has smoked 7 while you've been waiting for me. But no, his dad's.
Well, he's still here. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly. I call him the lovable rogue. Yeah, he's he's.
I call him other things, but. No, he's a great character, your dad.
We do too.
Yes.
I'm just trying to be polite because it's a podcast. So, Paul, for those that don't know you, because we do have a wider reach than just fish and chips, you were Paul Williams, the sort of managing director of KFE UK.
KFE UK, yeah.
And then KFE is now essentially the umbrella company for what sells Kremko ranges, Smito ranges, Fado, Perfecta. It used to be just Kremko, but now there's quite a whole host of products or ranges now.
Yeah.
So how does someone like Paul Williams get into the fish and chip industry?
Through a very strange route. I left school in 1975, and I joined the police cadets in Northamptonshire and progressed on into the police, and I was sent to Corby as my first posting, which I was from the other side of Northampton, which was quiet, and Corby was in those days renowned as almost like hell on earth. It was a steel town full of Scottish and Irish, and it was almost like a petrifying experience to leave home to go to Corby. But it was a life experience that I'll never forget.
So it was a life experience in a few years because you wasn't there for long.
Actually in Corby, which is where I met my wife, which is we'll lead on to. It was 18 months, but I think 18 months in the police in Corby was like 10 years anywhere else.
Was it a rough place then?
Yeah, rough.
Really?
It was. Yeah, I think I'd come from an area where there was a degree of, I'm not sure respect is the right word for the police, but actually, even if you were doing nothing wrong and there was a policeman, you'd sort of smarten yourself up or something. Whereas it was just the opposite in Corby.
Oh, really?
It was, it was tough, and it changed. I suppose in a way, it opened my eyes to the real world. I was from a village, small town. I played a bit of rugby in Northampton, so I knew my way around a bit, but this was a different world altogether.
But is this because of the steel workers?
I think you're going back to the 70s, so you're talking about people who worked really hard. They got paid on a Friday, and by Sunday night they were skinned.
Wow.
And then it started all over again. But they were workers, grafters, but the money was to be spent. So from a policing point of view, it was tough. You didn't really do anything Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it all happened.
So it's a bit like the chip shop game.
Yes, a similar. So it was a very strange move because I met Avril because her family had fish and chip shops in Corby.
Yeah.
So obviously, being a young policeman incapable of catering for myself, I used to live on fish and chips. So we used to go in. So I met Avril there, and then within 12 months of meeting, we got married. And I remember on our wedding night, my dad said, "You two, you've only known each other a short time. The last thing you need is children. You just want to get to know each other and experience life." So 11 months later, Nicky was born. 2 years after that, Tanya was born. I had the utmost respect for my father. No, I loved him to bits. It's just, those things happen. But obviously, that was the connection through fish and chips.
Yeah.
So through that, we got into fish and chips. It seemed moving from the policing to fish and chips and our own business seemed a far smoother, easier life.
Yeah.
Be it the fact that we were on a really rough estate, our fish and chip shop in Corby. So a lot of the people who were customers, I'd had altercations with
prior
over the previous 18 months. So
How long did you have that shop in Corby, that first one?
Not too long, probably a couple of years.
Did people grow to sort of be less violent, do you think, or more respectful to each other, or do you think that it was just that you were in that was that era?
I think it was that era.
Yeah.
I think I'm sounding bad on Corby because Corby was a great part of our life, but I think it was a steel town and it was the 70s, 80s. It was a different era altogether than life is now.
We've got a warehouse in Corby. That's where we store all our products. And and I've noticed that there's two accents that you come across at the warehouse. One's Scottish, yeah. And it's really weird the first time you hear it because you think, well, we're in Corby. Like, so you got the Scottish accent, you got the Polish accent, and then when you hear them both together, that's even weirder. You know, and I think that, but I guess the Scottish accent probably comes back from like when people came to work.
They paid. I think Avril says they used to. I can't remember how much it was, but it was say they would pay you to come down from Scotland, and guarantee you a job and accommodation. So obviously it was full of Scottish and Irish workers. So the town evolved from that, and obviously fish and chips then was a fantastic thing to be doing.
Well, I guess it was a working class meal for lots of working class people. Yeah.
And it was obviously in the era of you were busy at lunchtime, tea time, and when pubs were coming out in those days at 10 o'clock, and even the local Irish club and this type of thing, they'd come out at 11. So we were as busy on a Friday and Saturday night, after 10 o'clock, as we were on a Friday tea time.
Wow. And then you moved on to Leicester, was that right?
Yeah, we opened because the one in Corby was existing. We opened our first one in Leicester, in the marketplace in Leicester.
Yeah, because I think that was around the time, give or take a few years, when my dad opened in Leicester as well. My dad had his first shop in Leicester, which was 1978, I think, and give or take. And I think he didn't have a good time there.
No, I wouldn't say it was my best, one of my best experiences either.
Yeah, I'm trying to be polite about the situation.
Yeah, I think, and again, life is full of experiences, and you learn from it or not. But we went into the marketplace. I would say it's one of the busiest sites I've seen. It's a 6-day-a-week market.
So on paper, it was perfect.
The problem being is you're in a city centre, so people don't eat fish and chips, and this was just a takeaway. Walking around, they don't traditionally eat fish and chips. And at 5 o'clock, everybody went home. So even though there was loads of pubs and clubs, that was midnight. And we did try for a while, but there was no business. So our business was from really 11 o'clock till 3 o'clock, and it was all chips. And we used to do burgers on a grill with onions, chips and burgers.
Wow.
But it was an expensive location for doing chips and burgers. Wow.
How long did you sort of give it there then?
We were there 2 years. The only reason we came out in the end is that VAT was coming in.
Yeah.
And also, from our point of view, we were selling burgers was a big part of our business, and a company called McDonald's came along to Leicester.
I'm guessing at that point a little known company.
Known, yeah. Actually, it's a strange thing, but we used to take a trip to go to London. We'd go to a show, or sometimes just to the cinema, and we'd always go to McDonald's when they'd opened, because it was like this new place. I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't do that today.
Me and my brother used to do that though. Like when Subway opened in Leicester, that was our nearest one back then. Like we're talking, I was still in the shop, so probably 15 years ago. Just got our driver's licenses. It was an excuse to get out and go in the car, really. Yeah. And we'd go all the way there for just to sit, chill, have a sandwich. Like now, I don't even want to walk past the Subway now. Like I don't know, just but it's the same sort of thing in some respects, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it was new, and I suppose going back. At that time, not long before, certainly when we were at Corby, the only takeaways there were fish and chips and Chinese, which is why shops were so busy, because you had lunchtime business, you had pub business, which obviously now fish and chip shops don't have a pub business. They don't. A lunchtime business is very competitive.
Decimated by Greggs, really, in some ways. Yeah.
Greggs, Subway, all this stuff.
McDonald's.
The McDonald's.
And so on. Yeah. I think the food place has just become massively overwhelmed over the last few years, and and fish and chip shops especially. Well, not just fish and chips. I think every one of those people are struggling. Really, I don't think there's anybody there that's saying, "Oh yeah, I've got it well easy." I think when I talk to anybody in hospitality, they're all saying how hard it is. I don't think there's any sector out there that is like, "Yep, dead easy."
It's booming.
Yeah.
No,
I think it's not. I think it's not so much that it's booming. I think it's just harder to get the pound off that customer. I think
it's so competitive, and obviously the bigger, the McDonald's and people. There's always deals go on. So price wise, it's almost the market you don't want to get into, because you can't win, because these people can sustain it.
It's a volume game
forever and a day.
It's a volume game. When I chat to a lady that I know who's got, she's probably got 20 odd McDonald's franchises now. Yeah, they've got like the nugget price, they're hedged for the next 5 years. Like, you know, they've got their burger patty price hedged for the next 6 or 7 years. They know exactly what costs are way ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I think in our industry, we could probably get, potatoes on a contract for a year, maybe 2, if you're like really like, but 5 years. Like, imagine having everything. Imagine if everyone in this industry knew what, or any part of the industry knew what everything was going to cost them for 5 years down the road.
I think it's what's unique with fish and chips is the raw product.
Yeah.
I think that's why it makes it so difficult to replicate it. So I have the greatest respect for people with multiple sites because it's such a difficult thing.
Yeah, 100%. So sort of a double barrel question in some ways. A, what was it like? What was the difference between having a fish and chip shop before VAT and then after VAT? Because obviously before VAT, I think a lot of people would argue that VAT didn't exist and the tax man was asleep, and then after that, that wasn't quite the case.
I think,
and then what was the general mood like? Do you think consumers ever got VAT?
No, and I'm not sure that actually the opportunity then, and I'm not sure of the legality of it, was to actually say on a till system that it came up fish and chips £5 plus government VAT £1, and you made it blatantly obvious what the government were taking. Whereas it all got lost.
Like in America, let's say, the sales tax.
And anybody who thought, well, we'll charge more money and the turnover will go up was kidding themselves. Because actually, we were only in there a short spell before we sold that shop, before we moved on. But the turnover didn't move. Yeah. So we lost the VAT immediately.
I think someone said to me, and I read up on it afterwards, and it was that before, when it was just, what was it before? Before VAT, before we sort of got into that European Union bit, because that's where VAT sort of came in. Before that, it was something else tax. I can't remember. You might remember. You're a bit older than me, but
I can't remember what happened last week.
It was something, but basically, it was a different tax. And before then, it was quite similar to the American tax to some degree. But then, when we went into the European Union, as in with that segment of it, with the VAT, they said that we couldn't put the price plus VAT. It had to be inclusive.
All included, yeah.
And I think when you read why, it's because in America, for example, if someone was to say you go into a store and you buy a Walkman, which don't even exist anymore. I don't know why I thought of a Walkman, but anyway, say you bought a Walkman for $100, then you go to the till, it's $112 because you got a sales tax.
Yeah.
If the state puts that sales tax up, people kick off, and the European Union didn't want any of that friction. They wanted it to be the shop owner's problem or the business person's problem, and I think that is quite clever that has sort of been absorbed. But if I'm buying a range, though, I know that it's plus VAT.
Because the strange thing is, I wouldn't know on shop invoices now, but when you buy a McDonald's, gives away the fact I've been in a McDonald's once or twice. It obviously on your receipt separates the VAT off. Yeah. So, but I don't know with fish and chips.
I think it does. I think it does. I think as an industry, we've never really sort of. I think it's because our disliking for it, we hate it. Yeah, I think that anybody in the food industry hates VAT. There's no one that likes collecting 20% of of the income and then passing it to the government. Who would like it? No. So I think that for that reason, no one wants to talk about it, no one wants to mention it. But I actually think it should be the opposite. I think that if you put it on the menu system, all prices include VAT at 20%. I think if you did all of those things and tried to remind people and make them sick of it almost, then that'd be in my view, it'd be a good thing. But I don't think we do enough. But you're right. If you go anywhere else, on the bottom of the receipt, it does separate it, and it'll say this much was tax.
Yeah. Does it help your case? No. Does it make you feel a bit better? Possibly.
Ever so slightly. Yeah. So after that, you sort of then you finish in Leicester. You do a burger place.
We bought a hamburger restaurant in Bletchley, which is Milton Keynes now, which was a former Wimpy bar, but now that business is easy. It's a bit like you touched on. Yeah, I actually quite like that. It was a waitress service restaurant, but it was 9 till 6. Yeah. And prices were consistent. It was stable. Burgers, it was frozen chips, it was milkshakes, it was a good business. But the problem with that is if you're in a prime location where you need to be, you're always vulnerable at that stage to the McDonald's, the Burger Kings, coming along, and obviously then you're in a non-competitive. I mean, not sure it's your era, or we certainly know of them, but how many wimpy bars there were when I was younger, and now
2. I think it's 2, literally. I think it's 2.
Yeah. So, they've disappeared. Yeah, it's a far better experience because you're getting served, but actually that's not what people want. No. With hamburgers.
Yeah.
McDonald's have educated people that's not what you want. You come to the counter, you order, you sit down with a tray.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, and now they've changed that as well, because now you go in, sit down at the table, take your phone out, order it, and it comes to your table. Yeah, so they've essentially met Wimpy halfway, haven't they? In some ways. Yeah, I think I don't want to make this a podcast about McDonald's, because it should be about KFE. But I do think that they have really moved with the time.
Yeah.
I think. But what was it like when you were in business and they've come over with, let's say, I don't know, at the time, 20 sites, let's say, in the 80s, give or take, early 80s. They came over in 82, I think, didn't they? McDonald's.
Yeah, we were going into London, and then I think that would have been 83, 84, Leicester.
So then imagine, how fast they went from 0 to 1,000. That must have felt like, wow, they're just coming after us.
The thing was, it was just, I remember they opened one in Milton Keynes in the shopping centre, and they had a plaque up at one stage saying it was the busiest, not sure week or days trade that any McDonald's had in the UK. I mean, it was just phenomenally busy, non-stop.
Yeah.
And it almost threw you that actually places could be that busy for the type of product they were selling, because it wasn't any different then than it is now.
No, and it's just a volume game, and I think their margins are super slim. Well, as in from a franchisee's point of view, but it's a volume game, and I think that. But we took on at my dad's shop. We took on a manageress probably about 10 years ago, and back then, she said when she worked at McDonald's that the peak hours back then, this was one of their quietest ones in Nuneaton. They were taking $2,000 an hour. That's peak. Yeah. And I think, wow, an hour. And now you consider it's 24 hour.
Yeah.
It's busier, a lot busier. They've got bigger drive-throughs. They've got double stories. They've got 3 drive-through lanes. You just think,
well, they're constantly reinventing themselves. Yeah. We don't want it to be about McDonald's, but I think you look at them, and that's the trends.
Yeah.
I would say 5 years. It's a total rebrand comes in.
Yeah, you don't even notice it a lot of the time. No,
it's subtle, but it's total change.
And I think, and this goes back to what we're probably going to touch on shortly. And it's not only the reinventing of what they are, but because whatever they do, they might change the colours and the seats,
but the product stays the same.
Yeah, because the burger, whether you like it or not, is the same as it was 20 years ago, no doubt, 30 years ago. So I think that I was watching a really good film. Well, it's a documentary last night, did you ever watch? I don't know if you like documentaries, but it's a really good documentary, and it's Morgan Spurlock, and he talks about he's the guy that about 15 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, did a documentary about eating McDonald's for 6 weeks. Nothing else.
I wouldn't have recognised the name, but I do remember.
3 days a week, all he'd eat was McDonald's, nothing else. And by the end of the 6 weeks, he felt sick. And the fact is, though, if you eat broccoli for 6 weeks,
you'd be sick.
But it was just, and he did a second documentary about chicken, and he opened a chicken restaurant, and shows how McDonald's, they redo everything, but they actually don't change anything. The core stays the same. So yes, they've got green cups because green makes you think of farmland, and then they've got blue text over there because blue is known to be trusting. And it's so clever, the science that they put in. And it was just like, but did they change the burger? No, the burger is the same. Oh, except for the fact that it's probably smaller. So, and it's just like, and he was saying they've got scientists to review not just McDonald's but all the companies that make sort of fast food, let's say. And he said that they've really got psychologists involved, and they've really got to the human psyche and how we trust them. So they'll say, for example, in America they'll say antibiotic-free chicken. But they'll say, well, we don't use antibiotics anyway. But they're saying it to make you trust them. Yeah. And they'll say non-hormones, but we don't add hormones anyway. But we're saying it so you trust us. And it was just but we don't do that in the fish and chip industry, obviously, because it's a very honest product. We don't have to say, oh, well, non-GMO, because, well, it's wild anyway. And I think maybe we miss a trick that as an industry we don't jump on these marketing bandwagons that, because if we did say, hey, it's a wild product from the sea,
I suppose the sheer size of them just gives them the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas we're trying to get over the health benefits of fish and chips, but it's very difficult. You've almost got to do that as an individual
Does
shop.
anybody care about health? Let me tell you why. Like, not being funny, McDonald's, KFC, Burger King, all of these guys.
They've never been busier.
They've never been busier.
No.
So, and they don't talk about health. If anything, they give you worse health than fish and chips. Like, you know, so. And like, if you, I don't know if you're on Instagram, because you're probably not, but actually,
no. I occasionally get sent something from Instagram, but no.
I will send you some photos on Instagram.
I've not progressed that far.
And if you just literally see all the photos, no one is really peddling. I can show you in a minute. No one is peddling healthy food, I assure you. Even healthy food looks dirty. And I mean dirty as in it looks greasy and it looks sweet and it looks brown. And it's everything that makes your brain go, oh, I'd eat that. Like, it's burgers with all this, like, you know, with a nice sort of like a rarish fillet and gooey cheese. And there's no part of me that gets excited about anything that's healthy. Like, and I wonder if we're just getting bogged down on the wrong things in our industry, because no one wants healthy food. They want food that fills them up and tastes amazing. And I think that as an industry, we've always focused on, hey, I
think as an industry, we try and appeal to everybody. So there is a health drive. So we're trying to appeal to those.
Yeah.
I think there is a need gluten-free, celiac thing, so we're trying to appeal to them. There is a vegetarian thing, but we do it all individually in various ways. I'm not sure there's a concerted...
I think my issue is that by trying to serve everybody, we end up serving less people. And I think that if we try to go down the route of veganism, for argument's sake, I think the problem is that we've now gone from a very low processed product to a very highly processed product for fish, let's say, or fish replacement. And I'm not being funny. I just don't think we should be focusing on health. I think we should say, come and get it because it's fish and chips and it's better, you know. But health, like, I'm not saying we should be unhealthy either. Right? So that's not what I'm proposing here. I'm just proposing that we just don't talk about it as much. I think that's it.
I think it's a difficult thing to talk about when you look at a lot of shops and the size of portions they give. I'm not sure how you can log the healthy aspect of it when the portion size is... I mean, I go back to the days when we had the shops. We were certainly in Corby. We were getting fresh fish down from Aberdeen, and they were in those days a count, so it was 60 to the stone. So that's a 3.5, 4 ounce portion of fish.
Roughly. Well, you're talking about a real stone, because now they don't even talk
I
about
mean, I'll go, And a bag of chips was a 6x4 bag, level to the top.
So we're talking 6 or 7 ounces at the moment. Yeah.
And that was a portion of fish and chips for a steel worker.
And they were hard workers.
Yeah. So you don't have to look too far to think because I believe what we did to counteract competition is give bigger and bigger portions, because we weren't giving big portions in the 1970s or early 1980s. No, but we are now, or too big a portion.
And it's a gradual thing. It's happened very gradually. Like, and everyone says to me, "Oh, but people's appetites have opened up," and I'm like, "Well, I don't think they have, because we work less today than what we ever have. Like, as humans, like, I'm not being funny. I don't lift still. Like, I get tired driving. Like, so I don't think that we're doing more to burn off calories."
No, I mean, I hate to go back to them again, but a McDonald's meal is hardly a substantial meal.
No. So, if anything, they've bucked the trend by going smaller over the years, and their prices have stayed very, very tight.
Yeah, so they can afford to be whatever they are, $4.49 for a burger and chicken, whatever the price is,
and then
because they're not given a big portion.
Well, and here's the other thing, I'm not being funny. When I go to McDonald's, and I'm a bit of a pig, is because I'll buy a quarter pounder with fries, and they end up going large as well, and I'll get a few nuggets, because I have to have nuggets, apparently. You know, so they've got me as the perfect customer, because I bet you most people would do that. They always would say, well, the burger's never enough, so they buy something else. Whereas in our industry, that is more than enough. You can't eat anything else.
Yeah,
so
fish, chips and peas is a great
It is a great meal. Like, you're not going to eat fish, chips and peas and be like, oh, you know what, I fancy it. Well, actually, you might. You might say, I fancy an ice cream. Who knows? But I feel like, especially if it's a big portion, like that most people are these days, like, but I do wonder, how do you scale back from there? And I know where the high portions have come from. I think a lot of people, I always hear a lot of people say it's the Cypriots that did it. And I think we contributed, don't get me wrong, as a community. But I also think that it was in anticipation to when I talk to someone like my dad, he'll say, well, we had kebab shops opening next door to us, we had this opening next door to us, we had to do something. But
that's what I mean.
And it wasn't just McDonald's, it was kebabs as well.
The way of counteracting wasn't marketing
it was just
or refitting the shop, or it was give people bigger portions.
And I think that was okay when cod was dirt cheap and potatoes were next to nothing, and it was literally just very cheap. Whereas now, you can't do that anymore. Right? In my view, this is where now it's more important to be a businessman first than what it is to be a good fish and chip fryer first.
Yeah.
And my dad did really well. He's done really well. He's but he'll tell you he's not. He always says, "Well, I can't even read and write." And all he had to do was just serve good fish and chips.
But that is something I think from when I was in it. The only reason I know about how many fish to serve because I knew it was 60.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known they were 3.5 ounces till I worked it out.
Yeah.
Afterwards, after we had the shop, because it wasn't relevant, because you were making that much money that I would have said I wasn't a business person at all. I was a fish and chip fryer, and I was making loads of money because there was no VAT. The raw product was cheap. The market was all day. It was a lunch, it was a tea, it was an evening. You made money. VAT was the beginning of the change of that, and as I say, that was compounded by the fact that McDonald's and all the other more serious competition was coming along. And as I say, I just think that was a double whammy in a way, that actually the competition was coming and we were being knocked for VAT. And our reason, and I put myself in that because obviously I had shops. Our counteracting to that was to give bigger portions,
which is sort of the opposite reaction. Looking back now,
you actually think, you don't need to look far.
You got nobbled by a non-voluntary thing, and then you volunteered to give away more product as well. Which is, and again, I wasn't there, I couldn't understand that theory, but a lot of people did it. It was fear. Like, I get it, And again, maybe the non-business person in you made you do that, Whereas now, if you, I don't know, for argument's sake, if there was a 20% tariff coming on ranges, for argument's sake, you're not going to say, well, let's give them an extra pan as well.
That's well through. No, but I think now people are business, but they're aware of everything, every margin, every percentage, and that's, I always find talking with people, like I was with Alan Davison from Business at the weekend. He was talking about waste disposal, of all things. We had a hangover. I was going to say, it sounds like a really exciting conversation. We'd had a good night the night before, but we were talking about waste disposal. I mean, his depth of knowledge of that was just amazing. But that's where you've got to be now to maximise the benefits of your business and profits of your business. You've got to be aware of all those things. Whereas, as I say, years ago, you're making that much money. It was irrelevant.
And none of that was even being checked. None of that was even, no one even cared. So how do you then end up at Linford's in market deeping? So because obviously then you had the burger place.
We had that again, probably only a couple of years, but that was purely a step back. Because VAT came in, and we just wasn't sure what the consequence of that be. And 2 years later, it had settled down. So obviously, when you were buying a business, you were more aware of the turnover, the profits, and this. So we looked around. I think we looked at a few: Blackpool, Bedford, and ended up in Market Deeping, of all places.
On your doorstep, old doorstep.
So we came to Deeping, loved the shop. Did well. It was good, purely takeaway. Kids settled down. We lived above the shop, and then I don't know, 2-3 years later. Bill Shaw opened an office next door at Florigo, which I'd never heard of, and started to met Bill once or twice, and eventually, obviously, you can't meet Bill many times without he sells you something, and he sold us a Florigo, as it was in those days, and it was a great, compared with the British range that we had, it was just fantastic.
How does a guy from the northeast end up plonking himself next door to Paul Williams?
It's a very odd. We'd not moved here very long, and he moved. And opened the office right next door. I mean, to be fair, he wasn't how I became to know him, you'd have thought he'd have camped outside until he sold me a frying range. Whereas
that is Bill's
he
MO,
wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't. No, but it was a great piece of kit, and he used in those days Genie Ritson at Busy Lizzie's really well. So, and I think it was Eagles in Boston. So I went to see a couple of shops, and the kit was,
Bang
to
on.
me that was so.
Give us a little bit about Bill in his prime, like for many that don't know, Bill Shaw was probably was he the first person to bring over a Dutch range to the UK? Would you say?
He met a guy at Wisbeach,
Yeah.
which was Planet Ranges then, and that's where Bill recognised the opportunity. And then another guy, Ray Claridge, who was an engineer, he was involved with Bill a bit. So Bill was the one who saw the opportunity.
Because he was a bit of a super salesman, weren't he?
Oh, Bill could have sold anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it just happened to be frying ranges, but it could have been anything. I think it had been crisps before, and whatever it was, he could sell.
Yeah.
He had the gift. He had a fantastic charisma.
Who was it?
Has.
Yeah. And when I first met him, I thought his ability just to his shrewdness in selling was he's just about the sale, really. Whereas I think you guys have evolved a little bit over the years. Whereas he was just about the sale. You guys are now more about the relationship. I'd say, that's just my opinion. It's
long term. I mean, I think in a way,
he did.
When Bill spoke to you, certainly in those days, he was very new. That he knew he was a brilliant salesman. But he didn't know what he was talking. He didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, I remember you wouldn't ask him for advice on cooking things.
No. But that's why he was very clever at using the likes of Busy's and Eagles and
So he was quick to figure out that there was a weakness in his sales pattern, let's say, and then just filled it with professionals. Yeah.
And that's, to be fair, I wouldn't say we're dissimilar today.
We all do that. I do that. Yeah.
I would take somebody to one of our, even today's Busy Lizzie's. Alan's a far better seller of that equipment than I am.
Yeah.
Because he's paid the money for it.
Yeah.
He's using it every day. So
I remember Bill brought someone to our shop once, and he was like, "Oh, now Bill's gone. Can I ask you a question?" I was like, "Yeah, cool." He goes, "Is there anything wrong with this range?" I was like, "No, it's good. It's a good range." He was like, "Oh, but he's paying you to say that." And I was like, No, it's not. No, I'd rather he weren't here. But no, he's not paying me to say anything. And he's like, "Oh, no, but you must hate it." And I was like, No, not at all. And it was just I was just trying to think. I think that maybe they thought because the salesman was there, we'd been paid to say it's nice. I was like, I've already paid for it, mate. It's here.
I mean, it was revolutionary in the sense of it separated. You had round pans for chips.
Yeah.
And the fish was fried separately, whereas traditionally we'd always fried fish
and then
chips.
Throw some chips on top.
Yeah. So it totally changed everything. It had a built-in filter system.
What was your impression when you first saw this Dutch range then? Were you a bit awed by it? Was it a bit wow, I am cooking differently. I am throwing chips in one pan and a fish pan in the other, and it separated everything all of a sudden. Filtration, filtration would have been a big thing.
Yeah, it was. As I say, I could see the benefits, but I needed to go somewhere for somebody to show me. If Bill couldn't have. So I don't mean that in a bad way.
No.
Because I'd have thought, well, this all seems too good to be true. Why has somebody not done it before? Yeah. Whereas in actual fact, when I saw these people, well, actually, it did exactly what it said on the tin.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, isn't it? But I suppose back then, Dutch ranges would have been just a complete alien thing for people. I think back then in the 80s especially, I guess, maybe I'm wrong, but was Preston and Thomas the biggest selling range back then?
Yeah, they'd have been the biggest. Yeah.
And then obviously there was lots of other range manufacturers, which some of them don't exist now.
Oh yeah, lots.
And you just think, I could imagine, I was young, I was probably not even bored, but I could imagine, I'm just trying to think of, the British mentality of seeing these things.
A person who was later to work for us, he worked for a British manufacturer at the time, and there was a statement in one of the trade magazines, and it was a flash in the pan.
Really?
So basically it'll be here today, gone tomorrow. Whereas in actual fact...
It's probably the opposite. And you're not gloating, because you said to me last time we met that you felt it was bittersweet that actually the British manufacturing has sort of not been as prominent in this respect.
I think, unfortunately, and I'm not just talking from a range manufacturing point of view, British manufacturing in general was in the 50s was the main manufacturers in the world.
Yeah.
You know, but we didn't invest.
Yeah.
Didn't invest. And as soon as all the markets opened up, we've become a cropper.
It's fine saying I'm going to sell this car, but no one else can buy any car anyway. So yeah, it's fine. But the minute, I can buy an Audi and a BMW now, well, I'll have that.
Yeah.
And then everyone's sort of scrambling. And I think we're going to get onto Brexit later, but I do see a little bit at the moment where people are like, don't buy anything from Europe, you should buy British because it's British. And I think you should never buy anything just for the sake of it. Like, don't buy British because it's British, like, or buy Dutch because it's Dutch. Buy it based on what the technology is or what the product is.
There's no prouder British person than I am. But yeah, you buy what's best for you.
I'm not being funny. Like, the argument for me, it's a bit flawed when people say buy British, because are you not employing British people? Is your office not in Britain? I know many would say that east of England is a bit odd, but we're still in Britain, aren't we? So I just think, for me, it's just, I don't know, I just don't get that whole argument, to be honest. So Bill Shaw had the office next door to you. How long was it before you start sort of then doing a bit more with him and getting to know him a bit more? And
I'd have said fairly quickly, because I think by then I'd sort of, the fish and chip frying side of things I enjoy, and the setting up of a business and that, but then the weekly, daily monotony of running the shop, I thought, I'm not sure this is me. Whereas Avril, my wife, had it all her life, so I mean, I think it was different. So Bill sort of recognised the fact of, he needed somebody to train on these because they were so totally different.
Yeah.
So I started doing bits of training, and then he was, if you could train, he was getting busier, you'd be able to sell these. So when you're there, pop in there and talk to them, and he brought people to the shop, and I enjoyed that.
So you was like a part-time salesman or informal salesman, or just
I mean, when I was available and he needed me,
it was a bit informal. Yeah. So then, how fast would you say that he expanded? Like, when we talk, we always look back, but someone said to me that Bill sold more ranges than some people had ever just thought of, to be honest, in 1 year.
He did. I mean, that was probably around that time. He was selling a lot of and big ranges.
Wow.
So and we at that time we bought. Obviously, this was the Deep in Fry, which is now known today as Linford's. And then we bought the Boundary.
That's it.
Down the road. So obviously then Bill sold us a range and a chicken machine and a burger machine and everything else in there. Yeah. So the whole concept came in.
I'm surprised he didn't sell you the bricks.
Right.
But this is how sort of incestuous this situation is, because you started off at Linford's. He was next door to Linford's. You then have the Boundary. Then Bill and you, we're going to move on to this shortly, set up a company called KFE, where you first, then Bill comes in.
Yeah.
Bill, fast forward a few more years, retires, now owns the Boundary.
Yeah. And I suppose the more ironic part is, at the time Bill was selling me the frying ranges, his main salesperson, Oppo, was Paul Linford.
Who now owns
and those two bought the Deep in Fry, now Linford's from me, between the two of them. Then a little while later they decided to separate, so Bill kept Forigo and Paul Linford kept the fish and chip shop. But by then it wasn't Linford's. Initially it was PJ's, fast food emporium or something.
Right.
Because obviously Bill and Paul, I think, believed in burgers and chicken, and whereas he sold me that, but we were more fish and chips.
I think for a while, maybe a lot of people thought that's the way the industry was going, and maybe it did for a while. That we became general takeaways, and fish and chips was probably just a part of a big menu.
Well, that's why I look back and I can always put my hands up and say, I made that mistake.
Yeah.
Because I'm a great believer in now, we're fish and chip shops, so we should expand with grilling the fish or different species of fish, or there's loads of things that we could do without going on to Southern Fried Chicken and burgers and competing against KFC and McDonald's, and diluting what we do.
And it's, I think, if you look at a good friend of yours, a good friend of mine, if we look at Gary Rosser. And, he's essentially, I think he's now gone to like the periphery where he's not doing, he has got a wide menu, but it's a seafood menu.
Yeah.
So he's paired seafood with fish and chips. And for me, it works. And I know for many that would be a bit out there because it's a lot of technique that they have to master. But I think maybe some people always say, a lot of people say to me, is that the future? Is that what we see as the future?
Yeah, I don't think you can generalise because you could say, is that the route for everybody? No, that's not the route for everybody. But what would be the changes to me, the biggest changes in frying ranges sales the last few years is that 50% of them have a grill of some description. So
really?
People are fitting grill. They are, and I would say grills and a separate pan for gluten-free are the biggest add-ons now.
If you're doing a separate pan for gluten-free, are you also doing separate filtration?
Separate filtration, yeah.
That's nice for you.
Yeah, I mean, some people do have it. In fact, one earlier today, he confirmed, but he's having it drain only. So you can drain it into the filter, but you can't pump it back up, and then you replenish
does it himself. Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. At least it's separate.
Yeah. I mean, it's like any of these things. If you're going to do it, it's got to be 100%.
Yeah.
I think initially when it started, people doing gluten-free, I don't think there was a total comprehension of
not at all
of it, and I would put myself in there as well. But as soon as you filter through the same filter system, you've cross-contaminated everything.
I think that I was told that with the filter pad technology these days, that it does get out a lot of the gluten, and it's a very small micron. You probably know better than me, but it forces out a lot of the.
But it's not 100%.
And exactly, and to be fair, if we're in, I think for me the term gluten-free is very misleading. I think because that assumes that there's no gluten, but gluten is in the air. Like, not being funny, if you're doing me a gluten-free piece of fish and I'm in the other room whisking some real batter with gluten in it, it's going to get everywhere. So I think that the EHOs are starting to really come down on that now.
I mean, from a range point of view, you've got to have dividers to stop any potential crossing. The hot box has got
physical contamination.
It's got to be a separate hot box with drain back only into that pan. If you have infiltration, it's got to be separate filtration. Yeah. The tools you use have got. I mean, it's just an endless list to be doing it correctly.
No, of course, yeah. I get it. It is a hard job, to do all of that. And if people can do it well, then even better. Well done to them. One thing I always do gluten-free demonstrations. I want to show people how to not only get the best out of the product, but do it the safest way. Yeah, for me, it's just, I told you earlier that we had, someone call us and say that they'd felt they were glutened, as they call it, and they got contaminated. And since then, I've just been very much like, I'm coming out to see you. I want to show you the ins and outs, or the do's and the don'ts. Yeah. And I think for me, that's the best way to do it. And you don't have to do that, obviously, because you just sell the range. I have to do the hands-on bit.
No, but I think you have to have from our point of view, you've got a duty of care to give the best advice.
Yeah, 100%.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
What you're talking about doing isn't gluten-free.
No, of course. I was at a shop once, and this guy he's one of your ranges, actually. So it's not your fault, then, just to clarify. Right. And he's got this whole pan full of normally battered fish. Customer comes in, have gluten-free fish. Gets the batter out of the fridge. Wasn't mine. I'm just going to clarify. And just drops it in the pan with all that stuff. And I was like, you can't do that, mate. He goes, yeah, I can. He goes, I've been told that it burns off. And I was like, if gluten burned off, why have we developed another batter? And he was just, I said, you can't do that. And he did, and I couldn't bear to watch. So that was a difficult moment. It was hard to watch, But that was definitely your fault, though. Because it was your range.
I'm sure it was.
So then a few years later, Florigo then become part of ServEquip. Yeah. And then, did you go with them?
Yeah, Bill went as part of the deal when ServEquip bought him out. And yeah, business-wise at that stage, we had a few, I suppose, I've been in it 42 years, not everything is a positive.
No.
We had a bit of a run-in with the tax stroke for that man at that time. So, as I say, the shop wasn't the bigger appeal for me. I just enjoyed the business side of things. So, Avril carried on with the shop with her mum and dad, and I went with Bill to ServEquip. So I was fully employed at ServEquip, which was a negative in the sense of they were based in Croydon. So office-wise, it was a 3-hour journey every day, although I was out a lot of the time. And I wasn't selling frying ranges. I was selling Lincoln impingers, which were the pizza ovens.
I still see that Fred's got one.
Yeah, they're a great piece of kit.
That's the only reason I know what one is. So when you said I sold impingers, that's the only reason why I know what one is. Yeah,
great piece of kit, but not my passion by any means. So
would they not let you sell ranges, or was it
no? Because they had individual salesmen, but they were very focused on national accounts.
Okay.
So at that stage, they had the PepsiCo, so they had Henny Penny, so they supplied KFC. They supplied the Lincolns into Pizza Hut.
Okay.
So they had massive accounts, and they were just selling. I can't remember the name of the rotisserie ovens, but they were starting to sell them into the supermarkets. They were starting to do rotisserie chicken. So, and that's where I suppose everything in life you learn from, whether it's been good or bad. And while I was there, it taught me, don't rely on major accounts to develop your business, because they're very fickle. They're here today, gone tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Serviquip got the supermarket, the Tesco's, the Asda's business because they had a great piece of kit, but their after sale was fantastic, whether that be service or training. They had a fantastic training program.
So they help people sort of learn how to make the chicken. They had systems.
Well, I think the thing with supermarkets, it came as a bit of a shock. The risk when you're cooking chicken, so they needed a serious amount of training, because obviously they were rolling these things out in all their stores.
Yeah.
So it was a learning curve for me, in the sense of that depth of knowledge that they gave about the product helped them from knowing nothing to be able to serve massive amounts of chicken. So I think further down the line, when we've been doing frying ranges, spending the time to maximise the people's understanding of our frying range has to be better for us. Yeah. It's better for the customer because they've got a full understanding of it, and probably that helps us have less service issues.
Yeah, I guess so.
So and that came from Serviquip days.
Mm. And then how long were you selling the impingers for then?
Oh, only a year, 18 months.
Okay. Were you a good salesman?
They were major account. The things sold themselves.
Oh, really?
I mean, I'd been used to a frying range where realistically it would take you 18 months to sell. And I think that's where they made a mistake, because it didn't. Everything they sold, Henny Pennies, Lincolns.
There were widgets. They just slotted in.
You just bought a box.
Yeah.
Because actually, you didn't need to be sold the product. If you were opening a chicken shop, you had a Henny Penny.
And I suppose
you didn't need somebody to come and
I
tell you what a three or four or.
And I guess they were just fitted by plumber or electrician.
Oh yeah, I mean, be it the fact that they had their own.
No, of course they did,
installation people.
But even an independent, if an independent bought a chicken machine, they got someone to fit it. That was it. Whereas,
so it was. Yeah.
But then they buy a complex company, like essentially complex widget company. That then all of a sudden we're measuring this and.
But yeah, and I think they saw obviously Harry Ramsden's as another one that fitted into their Tesco's, PepsiCo,
so
Harry Ramsden's.
And Harry Ramsden's was a big deal back
at that stage, yeah.
So they saw it for the customer, not so much the product.
I believe, I think they thought we haven't got a frying range, I don't think they'd have purchased it without the Harry Ramsden's connection.
Okay, so then so Serviquip own Florigo. How do you then become exposed to Karemco?
Because they made the fatal mistake of deciding they would negotiate prices with Florigo.
Okay.
And to better negotiate the prices, they bring in some competition. So they started talking to Heis Ockerman from Karemco.
Yeah.
But obviously when they decided, oh no, we're going to stay with Florigo, they'd sort of exposed Heis to the fact that there was a market in the UK that he should be looking at. So, and obviously then there was a connection via Bill to me to Heis, and then we set up in 1996.
So I wasn't in that room because I was still at school. But that sounds like a crazy thing to do. Like, and it sounds a bit crazy because the people that owned Florigo then, Holland that is,
Yeah.
they were like multi mega wealthy millionaires. Yeah, they wouldn't have cared for that sort of tactic, would they? I guess they would have just been like, "Do what you want, mate."
Oh, they did. Yeah. Well, I think they didn't like what Serbiquip were doing.
Yeah.
Because they were a family, long-established family business, very nice people. I'd obviously, as we mentioned earlier, through Bill, had Florigos in my shop, so I knew the Goose Boys. I knew their father very well. That really lovely family. So they wouldn't have liked it.
No.
But obviously, he still stayed with them. But the mistake they made, I think, was they saw him and all the products that Serbiquip were doing and thought that was a great fit for them. Whereas in actual fact, that's not a great fit because the company's not focused on the fish and chip market. And if you're not focused on the fish and chip market, you won't sell. You can't have a guy selling, it doesn't matter, henny pennies, and then, I've got a lead for a fish and chip shop and he's going to go and sell it. I mean, it just isn't going to happen, however good your product is.
So then they obviously expose how good or how much potential there is to this industry to Heiss.
Yeah.
And not being funny, again, that wasn't going to be great for them in the long run, obviously. But then how long did it take for you three to you first initially, to then sit with Heiss?
Oh, not long.
You didn't give him a lift back to the airport, did you?
Yeah, not long. I can't remember. Heiss is excellent with days.
Yeah.
Heiss remembers.
Oh, so he'll tell me to the minute.
Oh, I mean, if I remember we had. It's a strange story, but we had a dinner one night, and Heiss came with a customer of his who had multiple shops in Holland to dinner at our house. So there was Avril, myself, Bill, and Jean, and Heiss, and that. So we had a lot to drink, and we were talking about, right, we're going to.
That doesn't sound like it.
No, not at all. And then what we said is, Bill came up with a story of what we do in England to clinch the deals. We switch the lights off, we stand on our chairs, and we drop our trousers. You just think, well, they won't do that, but of course, when he switched the lights on, Heiss and I stood there with the trousers down. But that was us sort of finalising the deal. We agreed a deal. I started above the boundary, in a bedroom above the boundary with an answer phone. Avril used to, if I was out, answer the phone. And the one thing I had initially is I had strong connections with Ramsden's, and I knew they were unhappy, So, that was almost my first port of call. I mean, Heiss had already secured 2 deals, which went as we started the company, which were with the Long brothers, Richard and John, who are still customers today.
I only know Richard. Nice guy.
And Tony McDermott.
Yeah.
Who's still a customer.
Nice guy.
Yeah. So, ironic that was the 2 at the time. And then, within a short space of time, we got the Harry Ramsden's business at the time where they were actually expanding.
But the ranges they sell in like Europe, Belgium, Germany. I don't know if they sell a lot in Germany, but Belgium and all that. They're quite different to the ranges over here.
Oh, there was a harsh, quick learning curve because Florigo had been in the market for a number of years.
So they learned all the...
So the equipment was more used to the hammering it gets in the fish and chip market compared with the snap markets in Holland and Belgium. So I would have said it took us, the best part of 12 months to get it exactly.
Yeah.
Although there was a lot of things on the range that were improvement because whereas Florigo as being part of Serbiquip hadn't evolved at all, I was able to go there and say, right, we need this. So we had different options on our ranges.
Being part of Serbiquip, there was zero feedback going back to the people.
No, there was, and there would have been no interest. And like you touched on the subject, Florigo as the Dutch company were a cash-rich company.
Yeah.
They probably until they sold recently, they probably produced the same number of ranges 2 years ago as they did in 1996.
Wow.
They were quite happy.
Plodding.
Because they were worth a fortune. So the drive had
and
gone
I think
out.
a lot of their success also come from the industrial stuff they do, like the big Christmas.
Yeah, that's where the money had come from. From the chip lines.
But don't try to say that, mate. I bet you now, even the money that's in range selling is big, mate. We know, mate. I know there's Ferraris and Beamers outside, like.
Yeah, they're leased.
No, but like it is interesting that in the early days, like how you've even evolved to this point. How many years now that you've been in business? So
next year is 25 years.
So now you've got you've got 6 salesmen.
6 salesmen.
You've got how many people work for you all in?
28.
28. You've got a service department. You've got multiple sort of technology changes that have happened over the years. Do you ever look back and think, "Wow, I'm surprised we made it through the first year"? Now look, like.
Oh, I think the first year wasn't. I suppose initially it's tough when you've got nothing. You haven't got Heist had secured the 2 sales, so that was our cash flow was those two sales. So that's how we started, and then Harry Ramsden's were a 90-day payment, so everything was guided from Holland. I mean, without
how flexible were they then?
Oh, in those days, they were building the business.
Yeah.
They could see the potential of where we could. I'd be honest, I didn't see us sat here today, but there was great potential, and they saw that, and business-wise, they've been totally supportive all the way through.
But they're also pretty ruthless, aren't they? As in, they're professional, they're ruthless. They're not ruthless, the wrong word. Professional is the.
I think people's perception of Dutch people, as we touched on earlier on, is they have sex in the red light district every weekend and smoke weed. Well, they're not. Actually, they're not. That's the tourists. Actually, they're not like that. They are very business driven. You don't develop the business like Heist has from where he was to where he is today without being extremely driven.
Like, would you say it's a source of like I don't know, inspiration about how driven that guy has been? Because
they're the driving force behind me. I'm one of these. I want to be the best that I whatever I do. I want to be the best that I can. But you're constantly driven. If I sold 90 ranges, Heist would say, "Well, why did you not sell 100?"
Yeah.
If I sold 110, he'd say, "Why did you not sell?" So there's you're never going to get to that comfort zone because you're always driven. What that does from our end is you invest because I practice what I preach. So I say to fish and chip shops, you need to invest in your business. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I invest in my business, but you have to feed that. So you need more and more business.
I sort of guess if you was to sit down next to him and say, he feels like, I don't know, the way you've sort of described him, it sounds like the strict dad. Dad, I got a B. Why wasn't it an A?
We have a. I don't go over as much. In the early days, I'd be over every month, but now we've got the facilities here and lots of shops. So I'll probably go over 2 or 3 times, of which 2 will be social.
It's just amazing how disciplined they are. 3 factories in 20 years, like
they've
that.
moved 3 times,
and that's like, and that just shows they've outgrew each one. Like, and you think,
and now the one now isn't big enough.
Yeah, wow.
So they will definitely. There will be further evolution to come.
I remember when we first bought our Karemko years ago. I remember. I think I lost my train of thought slightly, but it was essentially that we had to use an outside service company back then. What were they called?
Electrotest. Electrotest. Yeah.
And like now, this is all in house. Like, and this is how advanced your company has become. Like, if we wanted welding to be done back then, it had to be wait for someone to come over or something. Now it's like everything's done in house. Like, is that something that was always the goal, or was it just evolved naturally?
I actually saw the service side in the early years as a potential negative.
Okay.
So, but I very quickly learned that the problem with a third-party service is you have no control.
Yeah.
So if a customer's chasing me, if it was my engineer or my service department, I can influence what I do. If it's a third party, I can't.
So back then, I guess, let's say it was us, we wouldn't ring you for a service, we'd ring Electrotest. And if they bodge up,
but we employed somebody to deal with the service fallout because they were dealing with people like McDonald's, and they had big accounts as well. So they had to prioritise their business.
So you were getting the headache, but none of the benefits back then, essentially.
Well, I suppose we had the benefits because I thought we haven't got that in house.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas
you sold a range and moved on.
In the end, the Dutch did it. So from Electrotest, Karemco set up a service division in the UK. So they set it up.
Okay.
And employed a few of the engineers from Electrotest.
Yeah.
And employed a welder. So that was the start of it. It was still separate.
Yeah.
But it was now connected to our manufacturer, so it was a bit more influential. And then when Bill retired, the Cubitech High Sockerman took a share in KFE, and he put in the service division, which at that time, from their point of view, was losing money because it was trying to control it from Holland. So, which was a nightmare.
Why would you say that? Why would you say that you had negative feelings about that?
Because I'm a salesman.
Yeah.
So a salesman is positive. You're selling a great piece of kit, and it's all positivity to the customer you're talking to. So in my head, in those days, service is negativity. It's the total opposite. Yeah. And I didn't. At the early stages, I didn't see how that would be beneficial. Yeah. Whereas in actual fact, that one without the other just doesn't work. Doesn't make sense. You can't evolve without having control.
I think, if we think 1984, my dad bought a Preston & Thomas. It was June 1984 because it was a month after I was born. Because he keeps reminding me about it. And I think he kept it for 20 years or so. And I think, but there was no, I remember there was no, you go ring Preston & Thomas back then, even back then, and say, hey, I need a service. Well,
you're going back to the days where every town or village had somebody who could fix ranges.
Yeah, it was always that. It was a bit like that. It was just some guy that, he used to work for them or whatever. And
that's it. Or that plumber knows how to work on the ranges, he'll come in and fix it. Yeah. Which people did. But now, obviously with gas, you can't do that. They won't touch them.
Well, there's not many companies that sell ranges in the industry today that have a national service department.
Yeah, I would think, possibly a competitor, that would be it. Yeah. But nowhere near on the scale that we are. As I say, we've massively invested over the years because that is the only way forward.
And I suppose in some ways you've done that to compete with the competition, but you've also done that to keep up with Holland as well at the same time.
Yeah, as I say, we're driven by Holland, but from my point of view, I go back to want to be the best company that we can. I want people to look at KFE as a premier company in the industry. So you've got to support that. It's all right selling the equipment, but however good the equipment is, there will be a problem. Yeah. You've got to be able to react to that problem.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I suppose, I'm sure you'll come on to it, but having the kids involved, I don't need short term. Yeah. Nothing. There isn't a short term for me now. No. Everything is long term because they'll take over the business.
Has it given you a different discipline in that respect, thinking over a longer period?
I think I hadn't got to the age when they became involved that I was thinking I'll want to cut back or get out, whereas now I'm probably a bit more, in the next couple of years I'd like to be a day less. Yeah. But they're involved now and they're sort of settled in. So, but I don't think initially that was the idea.
I was going to say, don't reduce it too much too soon because they'll want you to look after their kids. So
that's what we're doing this weekend. Tanya and Matt are in Holland. I was up at 7:30 because we've got the dog as well, with the dog jumping all over me, then run the kids to school.
Yeah, I love dogs, but I just don't think I could do that. So if we stick to the ranges for a moment, many sort of in the UK don't like the fact that Dutch ranges cost more on the face of it. But I think one thing I was thinking about earlier is that when I was doing my research, I found that they don't, in not all cases, do they cost more. And it's a misconception. And where do you think that misconception has come from?
I think it's a historic thing that they were always more expensive. I think Bill pitched them higher.
Okay.
And obviously, that you're going back a long time. A lot of things have been influenced with Europe, with currency situations, which have forced prices up from our point. You can't absorb. I mean, when the Brexit vote came in, we'd forward bought euros to protect an amount, but obviously that was a big hit. For 12 months, we took a portion of that hit on our margin, but you can't sustain it.
No.
So
you also mentioned that sort of that thinking came because you got your fingers burnt in 2008. You were very cautious because you.
Well, I think we're more professional. We are a company that sell fish and chip fried ranges. That's what we are. That's what KFE is. Unfortunately, we need to be aware of what's going on with government, with Europe, with the currency markets. And now, if I spoke to a currency expert, he'd have no idea what was going to happen with the pound and the euro. But we have to be aware of that because it has such a massive effect on us. And in 2008, we took a massive hit because we didn't forward buy because the euro pound situation, the pound was always good. And it suddenly went from 135 to probably 115, 120, which cost us a fortune. And instead of actually biting the bullet and thinking, right, we need to buy euros now, we thought the worst was over. And 2-3 weeks later, it went from 115 to parity. Wow. And that total situation cost us £140,000 because obviously we had ranges that were owed, we had ranges in production, and we had orders being processed, all of which suddenly cost us money. We'd have been better off not having any ranges going through the process. So it was again, as I mentioned earlier on, through life, ups and downs, you learn by them. And now we forward buy. Now, I'm not clever. I have no idea what's going to happen next week. Unfortunately, most of it these days hinges on what Boris has to say because 10 days ago, things were looking quite good and it was 120 to the pound. And then Boris said, if we haven't got a deal by June, we'll go with no deal. And it's now 115. So there's nothing I can do about that, but obviously that makes a difference to us as a company.
Well, obviously when you're calculating a quote for a customer, you have to factor that in.
We will always quote that little bit, obviously under, to give us a bit of a safety net. But at those sort of drops, you can't quote under those.
No, of course not. So if we're looking at sort of when people say, they cost more, let's say, I think one thing that I've always thought about Dutch ranges is that they are more efficient. So that I think if we're comparing it to an older British range, I've not really seen a newer one recently. But if you ever touch sort of the exit gas pipe, not the gas pipe, the ducting, you'd burn your hand. Like you,
when we had shops, I remember we used to put the tea towels on them to dry.
Dry them off. and now on yours, for argument's sake, the modern Dutch ranges, not even the modern ones, even the older ones that we had, they don't.
Well, that's the efficiency.
Yeah.
Because the efficiency is such that the reason the ducting was so hot because that's your
building for
that's your money going out. Whereas now you don't get it. And obviously the difference with the level of extract is in the summer it used to be roasted in a shop. And in the winter it was great because there was that much heat coming off the frying range. Now you don't get that with Dutch ranges.
No, I suppose so. One of the biggest gripes you probably hear or see is that the pan cost if a pan goes, but I suppose I see some posts on Facebook sometimes, and they say they say it's planned obsolescence. Well, it's not planned because if it went in a year, that wasn't planned either, was it? So if it's 10 years, then that wasn't planned either. But I know some people that have had Dutch ranges for years and never had a pan change, and obviously with any form of engineering, things go wrong. But you've got warranties in place. So do you understand when people sort of get really sort of upset?
I think there was a period where you all get tarred with the same brush. We're not perfect, but we're not that bad. But what we did in the end is we offer longer warranties. We offer, with our contracts now, you can add on what's called a Platinum Plus. So you add on a plus. So that extends your warranty. So you can extend your warranty up to 10 years now.
That's fair, isn't it?
All the pans are redeveloped. So we've done something about it. Now, have we never had any problems? Yes, we've had problems, but we've always tried to put those right. And I think now we're past that. I think when people have the reassurance of buying a range and knowing that they could go up to a 10-year PAM warranty for minimal cost, then
I think in some ways you're being unfairly judged against people that have Preston and Thomases that have been in. Well, again, Preston, sorry to those guys that have got British Rangers that isn't Preston and Thomas, because I'm just using them as an example. But I think that when you're being compared to, well, I've got this 35-year-old workhorse, and I'm not being funny, I think that's nostalgia. Like, the fact that they love it so much. Like, my dad loved his, but the minute he got a Kremko, like, I don't think he's ever looked back from Dutch. Like, and I think that this nostalgic feeling of this something that's lasted 30 years. But then, how much is it costing you in gas? Like, how much?
Well, that's the thing, I suppose. The savings in gas are so big that if you looked at it against a 35-year-old frying range or a 20-year-old frying, or even a 10-year-old frying, the savings negate that. I'm not making an excuse for it.
No.
But there are huge savings.
My question is, and I'll give you an example, and we discussed it earlier. I had a customer, very busy site. They had a fire. It was nobody's fault, really. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't their fault. It was all above board. They had ducting cleaned twice a year because it's such a busy site. They had documentation. They had your range service twice a year, documentation. And the insurance company still tried their hardest to wiggle out of it. How long does someone with an old-fashioned, or even old-fashioned any range without the controls, let's say 20 years onwards, how did they continue to operate with that equipment?
Well, I would question some of the older ones wouldn't comply with any of the new safety regs. So technically, a gas safe engineer wouldn't service the range, which would mean they haven't got a certificate, so they haven't got insurance. So, but unfortunately, I know the person you're talking about. But I think that's just a sign of the times that when insurance companies have to battle against the no win, no fee claims, everybody who has an accident now has whiplash, £4,000 a year, £5,000. They don't pay legitimate claims.
Yeah.
I remember when we were, I remember once we had a washing machine leak. It's a bit of an aside story, but it shows you the difference. And it flooded the downstairs, and they replaced. We had cream carpets throughout, and they replaced the whole lot. Even though we said, well, we're not bothered about upset. Oh no, we have to because there's technically no stop, so we'll replace the whole lot. So they replaced. We'd had it about 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Tanya, she was littler then. She came into the living room with a tray of tomato soup, tripped over, and tomato soup went all over the carpet. And they didn't even bother coming out. They said, tomato soup, oh, that won't come out. They replaced the lot again. Even though we didn't, even we were quite happy with what. Now, that would never happen.
No.
You wouldn't have got the first one because they'd have said, oh, it's a faulty seal. You should have had this done, that done. I mean, unfortunately, one leads to the other. I think the Americanism of claims all the time for everything the insurance companies pay out on means they're not going to pay out on anything.
So that's from an insurance point of view. So we've got a lot of accidents waiting to happen in some respects with these older ranges, and then obviously there was the sort of like the dodgy claims. Oh, I switched on the range to wash it and I left water in. I went out the back for a minute and I came back and and obviously yes, because water evaporates. So that would never get paid out today. Nowadays, I think you probably wouldn't even get an investigator to come out and tell you that if you told them that. I think it's a no.
No.
So. But then also, we've got all this climate change talk. Surely there's got to be more emphasis on this, on the older ranges. And I'm not saying they should move over to Dutch. I'm just saying they should move over to new equipment.
But people, unfortunately, that comes back to the split in the whole industry, I think, is you've got the people at the top end. This is a generalisation, who are always investing in their business. I don't necessarily mean frying ranges.
And also, sorry to interrupt, by top end, you don't mean busy, you just mean people that invest.
Yeah. So they might be doing a new signage, they might be doing a small shop fit, they might be new uniform, but there's always something constantly invest because that business is giving back. You've got to help it. So invest, and then you've got the ones who don't invest anything, and that just spirals down. So in the end, what they need to do is such a huge investment. So they need a new range, they need a shop fit, and there's no money.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think, you know, if you're going to the bank, for argument's sake, and I've seen this sometimes, like when you go to the bank and you say, oh, I need a loan. Oh, what do you need a loan for? If it's just to catch up, I think they're reluctant. But if it's to get ahead, they're happy to invest. Like, and I think, so if you were saying, well, I want to do this and we're going to be the best at something, they would happily give you the money because I think they see enthusiasm and that you do genuinely try. But I think it's just to catch up with the market that's moving ahead of you. I think the bank would be a bit reluctant. I think.
Yeah. Well, the time to invest, I would say, is when you're when you're at the top of your game. Not when you're at the bottom. It's too late then. Invest when you're at the top and keep yourself ahead.
Well, yeah, I suppose it's no point waiting for a leaky roof, is there? And I think for me, I just see so many. And again, I don't want it to look like I'm bashing the British here. I'm just bashing anything that's really old. You know, not being funny. Yeah. You know, David Miller had a 30-year-old Florigo. And again, I would argue the same thing.
Yeah, we've got 20-year-old. You know, ranges in the market. So
how long? As long as you guys are servicing, that's fine. But if you're not, how long are they going to be safe and compliant for? That's my concern, I think.
Well, that's I suppose that again comes back to with frying ranges. Sometimes people don't change because there's nothing new to change for. So innovation is key. You have to innovate to give a reason for the customer to change. You know, we've gone from when we started, it was round pans for chips, square pans for fish. Now we've still got square pans for fish, be it their high efficiency, but we've got basket frying pans for chips. You know, so there's a reason. The controllers have changed. When the touchscreens come in, that'll be the fourth set of controllers. You know, the filtration systems are now triple filtration. It has to evolve because otherwise, why change it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What can you offer me? Well, actually, that's the same as my 20-year-old one.
Yeah.
Well, I won't bother changing it.
And I think that was the argument. I remember when I got Kremco way back when, and Bill came out to see us, my dad being stubborn, got P&T. And said, come out and see us. Like, you know, my son wants to look at a Kremco, but I want to look at another P&T. And like after Bill left, all right, he's ultra salesman, whatever you say, like he's going to sell it to you. Like, you know, my dad looked at the P&T and thought nothing's changed. Like nothing had changed in 20-something years. And I think that you guys, the Dutch especially, have been really, you know, you took, you know, you had heat exchangers and you got rid of those, and you know the filtration is now better than what it was all those years ago. And I think that you've just constantly innovated.
Well, you need to innovate. You get innovation from the manufacturers.
Yeah.
But they're in different markets.
Yeah.
So some of their innovation is not relevant to us.
Yeah.
So they have refrigerated top boxes and think not relevant to us. We don't have no use. What we need is sometimes people are reluctant to say, do you know what, if you did X, Y, and Z, well, some are reluctant, some aren't so reluctant, to come forward and say, what about, could you do X, Y, or Z? Too late on my range, but could you do this? Have you thought about it? Because that feedback, some of it is, well, that actually would be a good idea for us.
Yeah.
You can then feed back to the factory. Now, it isn't going to happen the next month, but because of the size of the whole operation, but that is how you improve. You have to feed back and say, we need this, we need that changing, can you alter this? And that's how you stay ahead.
And it can be retrofitted sometimes if it's not too invasive.
No, that like the triple filtration. Some people like it, some people don't like it. If you like it and you didn't have it on your range 10 years ago, you can retrofit it.
When I first put in our Kremco, that's the only, as much as I liked it, I was disappointed by the filtration. Not just Kremco's, anybody's at the time, because I think there was only 2 people doing it back then anyway. But then it was just a bag. Whereas now it has moved on. So
there's lots of options. I think
that has moved on a bit.
In the early days, a lot of the shops were the busy shops.
Yeah.
Because they're busy, they wouldn't have an oil problem.
No, it just
anyway. It became irrelevant in a way. Whereas now, I think the triple filtration is a better option. I understand it's not for everybody because some people don't genuinely don't like it.
Oh, really?
You know, we offer,
really?
we can have either with us. You know, triple or standard.
Well, give me an argument of what, not your argument, but give me an argument of someone else that wouldn't want triple filtration.
The only two, I would say, negatives against the fact that it's better quality of filter rate, which it is, are the ongoing costs of the pads. To me, the other one relates more to the fact if it's a managed shop, you can't change the pad at night because it's red hot.
Yeah.
So that means you've got to leave it to the morning.
Yeah.
Which then means
extra clean.
So, yeah, it doesn't take long, but obviously it's cold, sticky oil or fat. And if you don't do it, which is what I say about managed shop, there's a potential that when you go and try and filter all the pans again, you drop the oil and it won't come back through.
Yeah. Then it's
very minimal. Yeah, very minimal. But so many people, I think the reason it came around is you had to be honest. With the standard filtration, if you put it against one of the mobile ones, they're a better quality of filtration.
They were, and I think
whereas now the triple is better than that.
So gravity fed, which was just the bag, was nowhere near as good as a forced filtration, and and I guess the triple filtration is probably slightly slower as well because it is pulling through.
Well, you need a different motor because it's pulling through. Right. But I mean, then some people went with the papers that used to sit in the mirrors.
Yeah, that gave a better, those as well. Yeah.
So it protected the mirror bag and gave a better quality of filter rate.
Do you see ranges moving towards more electric? Do you see, like, again, with the whole climate change thing in mind, or?
We did have a conversation with Ramsden's a few years ago about new ranges being electric because of maintenance. Yeah. Everything we sell internationally is electric because I haven't got engineers in Saudi Arabia or Dubai or...
Well, you're clearly lacking there.
Malta, yeah. Yeah, I do all the training in Dubai myself.
Well, funny that.
But funny enough, I don't go to Saudi Arabia. So, but there is a benefit to them in the sense of a maintenance point of view, a massive benefit. They're a bit more difficult to operate, slightly because there's a plate in them, so there's a bit more oil, But
then I was told that they always get compared against the old-fashioned, again, not to draw a comparison here, but they get compared to the old-fashioned British ranges, where the elements are essentially welded to the bottom of a 7 or 8 mil metal.
Well, that's the automatic. When you say electric to anybody,
they're
like, well, it's twice as expensive as gas, which it's not.
No.
And what you're talking about is a couple of years ago, I went to Alton Towers to talk to them, and they had a frying range, old-fashioned frying range. They were talking about changing. When they switched it on, you couldn't touch anything on the fryer because it was red hot. So
the whole thing became a conductor.
Because the heat dispersed through the metal of the whole lot, whereas obviously now the element sits in the oil. So when we talk about 95% gas efficiency on pans, technically electric's 100% efficient.
It's just remove that.
There is a bit. They are as quick. They're efficient. They're easy to install. They're easy maintenance, but people can't get over the potential cost. They are more expensive.
But I suppose the fact that you probably, and tell me if I'm wrong here, and I don't want to be like dig them, signing your life away, but I guess that there'd be like a lot less stress on a pan as well because you're not physically heating up.
Well, the element's in the pan.
Yeah, but there's no
gas
in the oil underneath it.
No, you would. Yeah. We give 20-year pan warranty.
Wow.
So I mean, never.
And you'd probably never have a provision.
I've never ever. No, we've never had because it's not the pan is just there to hold the oil. The actual element is sat in the oil.
Wow.
So
yeah, I don't know. I wonder if in the end, anyone's ever done the economical calculation to see what costs more, out of the two. Because I know up front, obviously, you said it's a bit dearer.
It's a fraction, but I suppose the negatives are there's a bit more oil in them because, as I say, the element needs a plate on the top. So I suppose as a fish pan, you're always going to have the debris underneath because you can't sieve it because it's a plate. Yeah. They're as quick. I mean, with the filter system filtration now, you can lift the element, lock the element, so the whole pan's empty. I mean, we do speak to people about them, but as I say, at the moment, I would say 99.9% of people
Just
are
stick to gas.
the only people we sell them to are people who can't get gas.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with all the climate change stuff and how everyone's trying to move to sort of like a sort of negative or zero carbon use. I think that because it seems to be a big thing in every other industry, and I think in this industry it just seems to have stalled a little bit until they can fit.
But that is the industry in general, because if
Yeah.
you look at it, again, we touched on earlier, you tell me any other industry you go into and they've got a 30-year-old piece of equipment.
Well, I said, yeah, we were just saying, like, you won't go there, they'll be proud that they've got a 40-year-old oven.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think,
Yeah, and so that sort of thing is, unfortunately, that's still synonymous with the fish and chip industry.
Again, not to gloat on McDonald's a little bit here, but I was talking to the person that takes their waste oil away and then converts it to diesel for their lorries. And she said that they've got this determination, this drive to and they're not, she goes, you'd think they're just saying it for sales sake, but they're not. They've got this drive to be as almost zero impact as possible. And you think that, you know, that they're getting all their oil taken back and then they're using it in their lorries.
But they've just got such a big setup, though.
Yeah,
as an individual shop, as I say, talking to Alan from Business, people are doing things, to help climate change and all this type of stuff. People are doing it, but it's individual.
Yeah.
Whereas
So we can't
they
have
could
that
have
scale.
somebody in an office, they could have a whole department in an office in America sat there thinking of ideas to how to make themselves more efficient.
Yeah.
We just don't have
And
that.
it makes a huge difference. If they change 1 decimal point, wow, like imagine the difference it makes for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Impressive, really. So are there any sort of future developments we're going to be seeing from like Karemco, QB Tech, or is it all under lock and key at the moment?
There's one or two, not so much on the range, but the touchscreens are coming in.
David Hambry showed me his. He's very, very happy with this.
Oh, he loves them. Yeah, I mean they are still prototype, but obviously David wanted the prototype.
Yeah,
so
he said he wanted it no matter what.
yeah. So he has the prototype. So yeah. So but at the moment, purely for the volume that we do, I think by the summer they'll be standard across everything. Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't think on the range there's anything. There's always, like the grills we have now have evolved, and Cubitech bought a company called Adure from Switzerland.
And just to mention David Hambry once more, he is obsessed with his grill. Like seriously, like he's like, Stelios, come here, I need to show you something. I was like, oh, what's up, mate? He goes, look at this grill. And I was like, okay, it looks great. He goes, I bought it from Karemco. I was like, oh, it's great, mate. This was like, but he's like obsessed. I think he'd sleep next to it if he could.
We've got, I think the fact of someone like Gary Rosser, Rockfish, Rick Steins, they all use them. So the Fusco boys. Yeah,
wow,
so
interesting. One thing that I've got a lot of respect for is that I really do think that this company has evolved. I'd say that it started off as just selling ranges, and I think now it's all about building relationships. I don't just think it is selling ranges, although that's what pays the bills, obviously. But you've got a training school, you do open days, you do KFE on a mission, and it's seen. Look, they all add to the bottom line, but they take off your bottom line as well.
Yeah.
But you're doing it. The main thing is that you're actively doing it. What was the need behind a lot of that, do you think, or the want? What made you want to do more of that?
I think the open days was a recognition that exhibitions was not a lead beneficial to us anymore, that the market had moved on past that. Whereas with an open day, people are coming to us.
Yeah.
So they are, whereas at an exhibition, they could be coming for
batter, paper.
So they were a natural progression on, I think, for us. The Fisherman's Mission, we support the charity in the best way that we could. So, which I think we've given 30,000, 40,000 over the last 3 or 4 years. So, and it's the School on a Mission is a great trip. It shows what this industry is all about. The fact that you've got all these top operators giving up their time to go and train people for 3 days to raise money for charity. So I think it's fantastic. That's a credit to the industry.
No, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it's a great idea because not only are you helping people, but you're also raising money for charity all at the same time.
Yeah,
and I think that you don't have to do none of this. Like you don't. Like
no, I mean it's a lot of. It's a lot, not for me,
no.
As Tanya will say. Yeah, it's a lot of work for us to do it, but you want to put something back. Yeah. It's a bit like, that's not so much work, but, we do a lot of social, whether it be race days and things like this, because I sometimes use the term facilitators. I think we facilitate good operators getting together.
Yeah.
Because we'll put something on, and they'll get together.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll be part of what's going on. And sometimes you often see 3 or 4 of them sat in a corner discussing the fish and chip industry.
Quite intimate,
yeah. So I love the fact that we do that and the quality of people that we can get to those. Yeah. And it's a way of giving something back.
Yeah.
I like the fact of you can put on these events and you talk to people and get to know people socially. I think that's another thing that goes back to before I even started, in the early days, my dad was in the meat industry when he was alive, and he came from a butcher boy. He used to ride delivering meat on a bike to, in the end, he was sales and marketing director of ABP, of the biggest meat processors in the UK. And he was brilliant at dealing with people. I mean, most of the time it was rugby. I used to go with him. But he'd have all these people, people from the supermarkets, and he was just great at doing all that. And the relationship he had with them, even as a 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid, I could see that. So I think that was a thing that, from my point of view, I wanted. Yeah. I could see the benefit of that, and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I suppose I wouldn't do it, and we get. That is when I throw up myself 100% into the socialising.
Yeah, I've never saw you hang back from socialising.
No, sorry. But it's important. I think it's important for us because that's part of who we are.
Yeah.
But industry-wise, I think it is important because it brings those people together, and then people meet each other, and they go off, and it doesn't matter. Fred's perhaps about, Gary Ross is at Richard Ord's. They can't, talking about, come up to look at this or that, and it's great.
Yeah, but no, I know you like to socialise because when I was at the awards this year,
no.
I went up to Nikki and Tanya and I said, what we're going to do about getting your dad on this podcast, and they said, now's the moment. He's your window of opportunity. I says, why? They said he's had a drink, but he's not drunk yet. So he's just drunk enough to say yes, but not enough to forget.
You must have caught me before Barry Dittman came over with a bottle of Sambuca.
It was after that. It was after that. But you were still making fun of Gary Rosser, so it was all right.
Oh, right. I was okay.
Yeah, it was okay. It was a good time. Yeah. Well, I think you said, well, if you manage to make Gary Rosser sound interesting, then yes, I'll come on the podcast.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. So, poor Gary. So... What would you say? We've discussed a lot of it, but one of the questions that I've been trying to pass out as we're talking is what would you say the biggest risks to fish and chips are? But it's also linked to the fact that you visit many shops. What do you think the DNA of the successful ones are? And I bet they're both linked somewhere. So,
I think we're in the biggest risk. I think we're already in that. I think rising costs of the raw product.
Yeah.
I mean, especially fish. The wages. The last, I can't quantify the numbers, but it's quite apparent there's less fish and chip shops now than there was 2-3 years ago, and you get the impression that numbers are going to become less again, and that's despite the fact a lot of people are opening. The top end of people that the rockfish, the cod scallops, Eric's, these people are opening sites, and the number's still going down.
But we have discussed earlier as we were setting up that number's always been declining. If you think when you was growing up, there was probably 40,000 fish and chip shops.
I know Peter Fraser asked me to do a piece on frying ranges, which I thanked him for. Please give me another subject next time. And it was, I went to the NFFF, which was very kind of them to let me use their archive magazines. It was interesting, very interesting. How many shops, how many range manufacturers and this that there was. But there was 35, 40,000, and now probably people would say there's
10
10.
maybe.
Yeah.
Well,
and that number's going to decline.
Yeah,
I mean, I always say our biggest, as an industry, the biggest problem is that we've been around 160 years.
Yeah.
Because, if fish and chips started 30 years ago, there'd be far less shops, and we would have learnt as we went along from the McDonald's and this. Whereas in actual fact, we've already had 35,000 shops in the 40,000 shops in the marketplace.
And nothing was ever logged. No one ever passed on that information. No. But when you see and let's not just focus on the usual suspects here. But when you do go to I can look at the wall behind you. You've got Anstruther, you've got Quayside, you've got Townhead. These are all winners. McDermott's, Hodgson's, Chez Fred, Scallop Shell, Coleman's, Magpie, Harbour Lights, and so on. What is it that, this is your wall of pride. What is it that you see that these are all doing that maybe others could learn?
Attention to detail.
Yeah.
Without, forget investment is another. I don't think we've got any that are at the McDonald's 5 years and a refit sort of stage, but we've got people who are 10. I'd say the good shops are 8 to 10 years and a refit stage. But it's attention to detail. I listen to the trainers when they're in here, which is some of the names that you've already mentioned. And I've been in the industry 42 years, and their depth and knowledge is just amazing. I mean, I think to myself, I used to think I was quite a good operator. I know I've not had a shop for a long time, but their depth of knowledge is way beyond anything I would have had any comprehension of.
Yeah.
So, and that doesn't matter what it is, whether it's fish, it's potatoes, it's Alan with his waste, it's across the board. The detail is unbelievable. Yeah. And that's what differentiates them from anybody else. The quality of product in all those top shops is amazing.
Yeah. So if there's one thing that someone listening to this could do that's maybe on a learning curve or trying to do better, what sort of things would you suggest that they look at first?
I would actually, all these people that you mentioned are quite, happy for
Affable,
people to go and talk. That's one good thing with this industry.
Yeah.
People are more than welcome in your shop. Go and talk to these people. They're award winners for a reason.
Yeah.
And I say most of them, I'd be surprised if any, they'll all help you.
Yeah.
And that, or NFFF or our training school. Go to the training school. Don't think, I've been doing it for 30 years. I know everything. I don't need to go.
Yeah.
Because generally, if you've been doing it for 30 years, I haven't had continuous shops before. I go on the courses sometimes. It's the one thing the course teaches you is that's the correct way of doing it. Now, there's 50 variations off of that, probably 150 variations, which are still successful. But they'll teach. So if you've inherited it from your grandfather, your father, you've probably inherited massive amounts of bad habits. Come here, learn that there's another way, and perhaps between the two, you'll find a better way to go forward.
At least if it makes you judge things and learn something different, or at least understand why a certain thing works a certain way, then that's not.
No, I mean, why does Fred? Fred goes to shops all the time. Fred will tell you, a lot of the shops you go in, you'll always pick up a little. That's a good idea. Yeah. Never thought of that. So somebody at that high level of their game.
Someone that didn't like Fred, started having a moan to me. They don't. There's not a lot of these people. It's just the odd one.
How can you not like Fred?
I know. That's what I
He drinks tea. Doesn't offend anybody.
I know. He doesn't at all. But they were like, "Oh, he goes to shops and copies," and I was like, he'd tell you that. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with learning by what other people do.
Surely that's how you improve.
Yeah, surely we should all learn from people.
Yeah.
And I think, if you're just gonna, a friend of mine said years ago, if you've finished learning, get out and do something else, because what's the point?
No, I think we've touched on here, whether it have been my dad, whether it's been Bill Shaw, whether it's been Servicret, whether it's been Keep. I've learned things from all those experiences to get to where I'm nowhere near perfect.
No.
And we are, as a KFE, we're nowhere near perfect, but we're striving to be better all the time.
No, I think that's the key thing, mate. That's the key thing. And one last question: who would you say has been like an inspiration to you over the years?
Inspiration. I think my dad my dad is always my special. You
Yeah.
know, he unfortunately, you know, he died a long time ago, so he hasn't seen any of that. But he'd be the person I'd be most proud to sort of be sat here today, seeing where we are. But along the way, lots of Bill, for certain, you know, Bill's education in business was, I wouldn't be here without that. And yeah, I think lots of people. I mean, the operators today, I mean, and without them, it makes our life far more difficult.
Yeah.
You know, if we don't have the profile people and they aren't happy to help us and allow people in the shop, it makes it far more difficult.
Yeah.
But so, you know, that's what makes this industry so special. I love this industry. It's so special, which is why the kids will have a massive problem getting rid of me because I enjoy it so much. But yeah, I've made so many friends who are customers.
Yeah.
You know, forget the ones we've mentioned, but you know, the Fusco boys and Alan and Katie, and just loads. I love the industry.
Do you think that in some ways you wanted to emulate your father? You know, going out with him, seeing him, like, you know, do you think in some ways that you saw that and has essentially become that? So,
I've got a picture of him in the kitchen at home, and not so much now, but after, you know, if anything had gone well or anything, I'd often just stand and say. So yeah, I think he was the one that, without him knowing, I would have learned a lot from.
Yeah,
I know when he was alive, when we sold the shop in Leicester, or it might have been when we were selling the burger plate. He was always on about leaving, whereas actually he worked for the same company all his. Apart from when he left the butchers, but he was one of the innovators of bringing in vacuum-packed meat.
Okay.
So he went to America and brought that over. So he was one company man all his life. When that company took over, he stayed. And he said to me, there's a shop in Milton Keynes. I'm thinking they're going to turn it into a butcher shop. Do you want to be involved? I think he thought I would say, no, but I say, well, if you're doing it, I'm in. Take me to the shop. I got all the details of the shop. I was in the shop, and then he was like, no, I've decided not to do it. Because he would have been brilliant at that. But he was, to me, he'd have been my perfect employee. He was so much committed to that company and making that company great. And he was totally blinkered on how good they were.
Yeah.
But I loved him for that. Be it the fact that strange story was like, I called him out in the sense of, all right, so you'd rather work for them than work with me.
Yeah.
But
maybe fear. People, like, they feel happy.
Well, he was obviously comfortable being an employee.
Yeah.
Which there's nothing wrong.
Too.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that.
No.
But
not everyone can be self-employed. Not everyone can be an employee. Everyone's got different roles in life.
I know. I remember when we started in fish and chips. I remember thinking, when we were opening Leicester, I think I'll be retired, but I'll be a millionaire by the time I'm 35. Now, I'm working on the principle, every time you make a mistake, I'm not sure whether that lasts 5 or 10 years on, but I think I need to work till I'm 112 now.
Yeah, I don't know. I never thought like that. Maybe
I think because it was new to business.
Yeah.
And plus as well, in those days, you know, borrowing money, opening business, it was all exciting and great. Whereas you get older and I have the greatest respect for what people do, you know, some of the ones do now.
I agree.
Amazing. You know, somebody as an example, and I know it's a sad time for him at the moment, but Charlie Collins, you know, at his age to have 2 shops, ultimate respect.
Take your hat off to him.
Yeah, I had 2 shops once. Yeah, it was a nightmare. I was going to say it turned me grey, but fortunately I only have a few greys. But
no, I met Charlie's brother last week, or the week before. Even.
Oh, did you?
And for the first time, and it's just awful news for Charlie. And he's a good
obviously
guy.
we all send our condolences to him.
He's just such a great guy.
Yeah,
you know, and he's running 2 businesses, like, you know, young lad, and he's always on the phone trying to learn. That's what I like about Charlie.
No, he comes. If we have an open day, he's here. Trading school, he's here. If it was a bare place, I'll come.
And always looking to invest.
Yeah.
Always looking to invest.
No, he's He's a nice lad, and
I think he's got a great future in this industry. And I'll be really upset if by the end of this podcast he texts me and said I'm quitting. But like, I just think in this industry, he's like at the beginning. He's
well, that's what you want. You want young people. I mean, that's one thing we've talked about. Me with my young ones coming through, but I mean, you look at Busy Lizzie's the next generation. Fred's kids are coming through. Rachel with Tweed. I mean, there's lots, and young Richard with Coleman's. Yeah, there's loads of high-profile businesses where the next generation are coming through. They've got some big shoes to fill with those guys.
Yeah, it's true. No, it's so true. Yeah, well, so do your two. They have big shoes to fill, in my view. I think what you've done here it's not a small thing. And just to add, like, not that I'm going to suck up to Bill here, because I most of the time spent my time trying to duck when Bill was trying to punch me. But I think there is a contribution that he's made to this industry that it'd be a shame to go unnoticed, because I do think that on his quest to sell ranges, which was his quest, I think he did really...
Oh, he brought in... Yeah. Well, he accelerated... The Dutch Ranger would have come.
Yeah.
But Bill certainly was the catalyst in them coming. I think the other thing that he did is he recognised that fish and chips didn't market, and he came from a marketing background. Yeah. So he was the one who brought in kiddies clubs and all this type of... If you go back, that came from him. No, so he does...
You can link it. You can massively link it. And I think that, I spent some time when I went to Holland with him, which was an experience, I shall say, especially as an 18-year-old. And I think that, just listening to him talk, and the way, that he has sort of mentored people in maybe an informal way, but there's no doubt that I really think that I really do think that although me and him haven't seen eye to eye, he has made a massive contribution on this industry. Yeah, massive. I think that goes without saying.
I think he would have. Yeah. I think he had that natural selling ability and charisma that whatever he did, he would have been. But I just think he saw the opportunity with fish and chips being dated. If that's it's probably not the right word, but fish and chips needed to evolve, and he was part of the evolution.
Look, it goes back to when you didn't need to read or write. All you had to do was learn how to cook fish and chips and open a front door, and people would have kicked your door in. Yeah. And I think he would have seen that change massively, and then said, well, if you thought about marketing this and talking about that, and you can imagine how the last generation probably thought, you know what? I just cook fish and chips, mate. And now the flip side.
Unfortunately, you say the last year, there's still a fair number of
and that's flipped on its head now, because now you need to know how to use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Yeah. You need to know how to not only market yourself but brand yourself. You need to know how to cook great fish and chips, and then whilst you're there, deliver it.
That's it. Yeah.
So the whole
click and collect.
And I think that we're going to see more changes within the next 5 to 10 years as well. So I think that the next generation of consumers are going to be very finicky.
Well, that's something that, again, fish and chips is naturally slow at coming forward. But as you say, the marketing and all that sort of stuff was ages coming through. The look of the shops was ages coming through. And I think the click and collect has been relatively quick. I know there's still a push against doing delivery, but sometimes things come along, and it's a bit like now with the coronavirus. Let's touch wood and hope that doesn't progress into something more. But that's going to drive people to delivery, because people aren't going to want to go into a shop. Yeah. So it's almost, you have to, and you go back to our friends, Mackie D's, they do all these things. They're doing them all. Yeah. What? McDonald's wouldn't do delivery if there was no need to do delivery. They wouldn't do it.
No, they wouldn't do it. They just say, no, we don't need to.
So, but they do delivery because they have to.
And people in our industry say that it's challenging to deliver fish and chips. Let me tell you something. Have you ever got McDonald's and walked to the car? It's cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's cold from the McDonald's to the car.
But I suppose that is our argument, that we're a better quality food than that. Yeah. That we don't want to get to it's gone soggy, it's gone cut. We still want it to be as good as when we pass it over the counter. That is the difficulty.
No. But I think the delusion is that we forget that it's still travelling after
the same distance.
Yeah, because not being funny. Yes, it was. We want it to give it as amazing as it was when it just came out of the range, let's say, yeah, it's drained off, it's hot, but we're assuming that they eat it in their car. But the fact is, it's not. They're driving home, stop at the petrol station, grab a bottle of wine, chat to Brenda, then get home, and it's just as bad as.
But I think it's the perception that if you came to the shop and drove 10 minutes home, that's exactly the same as you delivered it. So you went from the shop 10 minutes to their home, so it's the same time. But if you went in the shop yourself and you saw it put in a box and you took it home and it had gone a bit soggy and it was warm, accept that. Yeah. If somebody delivered it, you're more likely to say, I'm not happy with that. Yeah. But it's exactly the same as you'd have picked. Yeah. And I think that's, at the moment, that's the argument of why we don't want to do it. But I'm not sure we're going to be forced into going that route.
But one of the things that I saw, and I want to pack up here now because
thanks.
We can talk all day. Like, I've noticed that we did a pre-podcast before we started as well, nearly, because we were just chatting. Should have switched it on then, really. But no, I just want to finish on the fact that I think this is going to exacerbate or speed up the decline of cash. Yeah, because cash is dirty. You know, you've seen the bottom of a till drawer with all the coins or dust and minging. Like, I think this coronavirus is probably going to make people just switch over to, I'm not holding dirty money.
Oh, yeah.
And I read an article about it, and they were saying that that's probably going to be a thing soon, that you'll see people just saying, here's card, and they don't want money because it's dirty. And so I think this coronavirus is just making people rethink things more than anything, like, their hygiene and so on and so on. So, no, but it has been really great talking to you. And it is nearly a 2-hour podcast, hence why I said,
I was moaning about the ones who were more than an hour.
And you were saying, I don't think I've got much to talk about. And you haven't shut up, Paul.
I blame you.
So, no, but honestly, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I think there's a lot for people to get out of this. I really do think so. So if they make it past the hour mark, I think there's a lot of good nuggets, I do think so, personally. So thank you for your time. I thoroughly
enjoyed it.
Thank you for your time, and I'm going to get out your hair now.
Excellent.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers. Bye.